Hi there, welcome to a focused video in understanding the alternative perspective and thoughts from the other half when it comes to a survivor dealing with compound trauma and PTSD, how separate individual events post big traumatic event or a bad controlling relationship, how it's all individual, but it can compile leading on to more struggles in life and restrictions when the survivor comes across the right person in their life, but unfortunately at the wrong time. The challenges and obstacles faced during that period. Whilst I have done a previous video understanding it from the mind of what a survivor could be going through and how these individual events can amount to limitations, restrictions in a new relationship, whether that be not sharing location, not wanting to meet up in person, avoidance, not sharing photos or how a person appears, being very cautious when it may come to levels of intimacy or deep talk, etc. What I want to do today is provide it from the alternative side, what the partner may be thinking, how they feel, what they respond with, and how they react. This is going to be done, just as a disclaimer, as a role play point of view. And I'm going to be sharing with you my raw, honest thoughts if I was in a position where I knew or was with someone in a relationship and they just so happened to be a survivor of trauma from the past and possibly was once in a bad relationship or a chain of separate bad relationships which has limited the window of tolerance and trust within them, how it can make things more challenging and at arm's length in the moment. What does that do for me? What are my wants, hopes, wishes for the survivor? How do I want them to be or feel? And how do I react and my thoughts on what they've gone through? That's the scenario I want to show today, because it's important to look at it from all sides, and especially when it comes to a friendship or more so a relationship, both sides matter because both should be equal to one another within that connection. As a disclaimer, whilst I don't represent the total population of people within the UK, nor the whole world, this is just perspective, okay? But nevertheless, my raw, honest thoughts. So, kind of going in the order of like how it was done in the last video, that's what we will do. Explaining briefly the effect it can have on the survivor, but then my response. What would I do in that moment? What would I be thinking? Just for that full understanding. If you are interested in videos like this or previous role play scenarios, or even the backstory of this original video theme of compound trauma, you'll be able to find it all available top right corner up there where the I symbol is. Click on that, you get a drop down menu box which will have the full playlist and the odd loose video attached. I just want to say welcome if you are currently here watching the live premiere, I appreciate it. And for anyone that may be watching this video later or even on catch up, it is appreciated. And at any point or time, if this video does get a bit heavy or too full on, you can pause the video, take a break, have a rest, get a drink, you do whatever that makes you feel most comfortable. And you can always return back to watching this video anytime, no matter how many times you can. This video is not going anywhere. With that all being said, let's begin. So, if I'm in the situation and I'm in a relationship with someone know of someone, the beginning of a connection, and they are a survivor, they've got PTSD, they might have additional struggles and issues as well. If I found out that they were cheated on in the past, for example, in a past relationship, maybe even the original bad controlling relationship with the past bad ex-partner, that ex-partner may have cheated on the survivor. The survivor may have heard about it or walked in on it. What's my honest thoughts to that? The way I see it is, it simply shouldn't happen. If you ever find yourself lucky to meet someone, to be with an individual, if that was the case for me, for example, the one thing you don't do is then start looking around for other people on top, because most importantly, if you find someone, you should be able to connect and have all focus and attention just on them because they're worth it, and at that moment no one else is. No disrespect to other people, but that's how it should be. And secondly, considering how hard it is in this world to actually find someone in the first place, to actually be with someone in the first place, to find someone who is kind, who is nice, who is very understanding and patient and doesn't look down and doesn't judge. If I was in a position where I came across a person that had those traits, for example, the most stupidest thing one could do is disrespect that, disregard it, and start messing around with other people out there. And yet, that's what that bad ex-partner did, or may have done, to the survivor. How could anyone do that? Not just to a survivor, but really anyone in this world. Some people may do it because they think they've got infinite resources, that they can just go about and do whatever they like and please without any consequences. But then in other cases, outside of cheating, you'll get genuine people, normal, genuine people that don't mess, don't do anything bad. And they may not be able to come across people, or may not be as lucky. Sometimes in life, the people that get lucky are the ones that don't handle it with respect. Sometimes in life, the individuals that are in the presence of a partner who may later become a survivor, depending on the situations and the treatment, the ones that get lucky aren't always the respectful ones. It's kind of messed up in a way, being honest, but that's sometimes how it is in life. And it doesn't justify it whatsoever in terms of the bad partner's actions. But this is the thing, if the bad ex-partner was able to abuse or maltreatment, physical, mental, hell, put the survivor through that, when it comes to the level of cheating, that is just another form of emotional abuse. Emotionally manipulating and trying to make the survivor feel less of a person or less worthy, to make them question and doubt themselves. Now, if I was in the presence of a survivor, I would never want them to ever doubt or question themselves, whether that be their ability, whether it be what they're good at or what they think they're bad at, whether it comes down to what they can do and can't do, and so on, or how they reflect on themselves. I understand if a survivor has gone through a lot, they may still question themselves and put themselves down and not feel equal. I get that. I'm not going to challenge it. I'm not going to demand or make them change their mind. But I want to be that presence that provides a counterpoint and a counter presence to say that you are worth more than enough and deserve everything. And yet that previous bad partner failed to see that and failed to see the good in you. Yet you were able to look beyond the bad and try and see the good in them. Were they deserving of that? Maybe not. Were they deserving of your time? Likely not. Now, I can't speak for everything, of course, but in that situation and scenario, no one, and especially a survivor, shouldn't have to go through that in the past, because it's an emotional abuse It can lead to long-lasting mental visions within, besides the other trauma and possible loss, just how it's ingrained in the mind. It can be quite heavy, understandably, and it can last over time, and it can cross over with a new relationship. So if I was in that position and there was some kind of conflict with how they see themselves and think and feel in the moment, it's not a demand to just drop the past and to just move forwards like nothing happened. It's to just gently lower the weight. It's okay. What happened in the past should never have happened, but what happens now only happens, whatever it is, if you're ready, if that's what you want, as in some kind of connection, some kind of foundations being made. Nothing to be rushed, nothing to be pushed. But once again, I personally wouldn't want or hope for the survivor to think less or to feel that they're below me. I would want them to be on my level, because that's where they deserve to be. And in terms of the actions of seeing, interacting, doing other stuff with other people in that sense, like what a previous person did in the past, from my point of view, to describe it visually, if I knew of someone, was with a survivor, and if there was a room full of 1,000 people, every single time I look around, the first person I'm looking for and looking at is that survivor, that person I'm, supposed to be with. Everyone else in that room is irrelevant to me. And I don't mean to be rude, okay? I'm just giving you that visual idea of the way I see it, okay? The room could be packed and could be full, but no matter how dense and crowded that room is, no matter who is in there, my eyes are scanning for that one person and that one individual that's connected with me, vice versa. Do they stand out in the room? Absolutely. Doesn't matter how crowded it is, whether it be the person's voice that's unique to them, whether it be within reason, the appearance, but most importantly, internally as well. The voice, the sounds, what makes the person stand out, what makes them them, and can't be compared to anyone else about. Why would I want to ruin or tarnish any of that when in that moment, when in the presence, they're the best person about? They're the most unique individual around. And, on the sideline, just to give that example of traits and characteristics, kind of breaking the fourth wall here. But when you look at the live chat, when you look at online, just as an example, how some people, certain individuals act online and through the live chat, how they can be very welcoming or warm, understanding, patient, very good sense of humor, loyal, etc. Those type of characteristics within a person, in that scenario, why would you want to throw that away? Why would you want to destroy any of that? Whether that person be a survivor or not. Just why? It doesn't make sense. It's the one thing I could never possibly do. If I'm connected with someone, I'm locked in, okay? On the sideline, with a previous partner, bad individual, not to justify, never to justify, but just a backstory. They may do what they do as a form of punishment and further control, to make the survivor feel less, but to keep them around and try and convince them that there'll be no one else in this world that will take or have them just for them, that they have to be shared with other people in a twisted way. That self-belief, being convinced to that standard, can backfire and lead to that spiral and possibly that rebound effect when experimenting elsewhere, but not quite under the mindset of who they really are and what they really want, but by the influence of a bad partner. In my opinion, I don't think a person such as a survivor should ever be made to think less or to be smaller than who they are, but they should be present, they should be accepted, acknowledged, and what's within as well. Anyway, I do get the effect it can have and the complications it can have in a new situation and encounter, holding back a little bit, not wanting a repeat of the past, or possibly accepting the past for what it is and saying to the other person, you know what, the way I feel, this is an inner monologue of them possibly. The way I feel, how I've been made to think, the new norm is I can't have you exclusively, but I'll take a piece of you if that's enough, if you're satisfied, and then you can do anything else. You can be with anyone else. I'll reach around and find other people that you can be with. If that was ever, that type of dialogue was issued to me, I wouldn't think less of them. I wouldn't be disappointed. I just simply respond back and say, why would I want anyone else when you're more than enough? You are everything that I want and hope for. Going anywhere else arguably would be a downgrade, and it just wouldn't be right. Once again, no disrespect to anyone, it's just the scenario, as in what could be said, what I would say in that situation. I know where I'm looking, I know where I'm going, and that involves you, okay? Within reason. Now, beside that, moving on to the aspect of the compound trauma of how to say it without YouTube getting sensitive, the R word, when it comes to poor maltreatment, physical treatment without consent, intimacy without consent. In that situation, the impacts it can have on the survivor can be great and long-lasting, and once again can make the survivor question or doubt themselves, blame themselves, and think or feel slightly unsure, maybe confused about a new relationship or certain possible requirements or thoughts about what it could entail within a new one. My honest thoughts are, when it comes to the physical side, or such as with intimacy, that isn't priority. What is priority is making sure that they're safe enough, they feel secure, and they can just be who they really want to be and be honest and real. The foundation's the most important part. The other stuff is important, but not at the top, the pinnacle. The physical aspect, the intimacy aspect doesn't define the whole connection with that said person. There's a lot more behind it, because if there wasn't, it would make it rather shallow, wouldn't it? And there might be a possibility that in the past, with a previous connection or encounter that survivor had with a past partner, it may have been built off deceit, built off trauma bonding, and built off being satisfied in a forced, unnatural way, etc. I don't know if I mentioned it just before, but the aspect of things being done without consent, the bad partner may do it as a form of control, a form of punishment, and even a form indirectly as treating the survivor as like a punching bag, that whenever the bad partner has a bad day or messes up, they blame their failures or take their frustration out on that said partner, the survivor, when they've done nothing wrong. In my position, if anything went wrong in life, or when things are bad or in a mood frustrated, I would hate the idea. I would never consider it, but just internal thoughts only, introspection. The thought of taking it out on such as the survivor who's done nothing wrong but everything right, or at least tried to, to be there present, to be understanding, to accept. How could you possibly do anything dark or negative to them? In the mindset of a bad partner from the past, likely to cheat, to do stuff without consent, clearly they have psychological issues going on and a dark past themselves. Doesn't excuse it, doesn't justify, but there's something going on there. There's something clearly wrong with them. I would hate the idea of if the survivor felt that all they could offer was the intimacy side, whether they wanted to or not, as a means of people pleasing, like a trauma response. There doesn't need to be any people pleasing in the moment or in a situation. I just hope that they can at least stay still to begin with, to just be comfortable in silence without having to really do anything, or both doing nothing but just being present and going from there. That if a survivor had been treated physically badly in the past in many different ways, I wouldn't react negatively if they flinched, if they were cautious, even if it was just a simple tap on the shoulder or a pat on the back. A sudden flinch or tenseness of the muscles is fully understandable, because there's levels to it and boundaries which the survivor may have built up a defense mechanism, a shield and a wall. Deep down they know what they may want or hope for, but on the surface layer, still being cautious. And I could be the safest person about, but I don't expect them to feel safe immediately. I can't say to them that I am this and I am that, and then that's how they change. All that can happen is just to be one's self, for them to possibly adapt, see it for themselves without me convincing them, to let the actions or the lack of bad actions do the talking, and for them to passively pick up on it and then go from there. All the other things along the way don't need to be rushed. As long as there's a level of communication, that's what ultimately matters. At the end of the day, the difference between communication and the aspect of the physicalness and the intimacy aspects, the communication always comes first. It's something that previous partner clearly failed to do. They took what they wanted, they did what they want, and they completely disregarded the wishes of the survivor. So at times the survivor may have been forced into a corner where they had no choice, or they had to make excuses up to avoid certain interactions, and then it led to it backfiring by the bad partner using it, weaponizing those supposed excuses and calling the survivor out, or breaking that promise of privacy and sharing it to the world or strangers, which is messed up. Because when privacy is broken, trust is too. When sensitive topics or stories or situations with the survivor is shared outwardly to strangers or friends of friends, it can make it really hard for the survivor to feel being out there the same way, or facing people, because of that fear of they know, or they know about this or that. Whether it's true or not, it's just such sensitive things and discussions should not leave the walls of the house if you're, for example, living together or digitally together. That whatever is said or talked about remains here and nowhere else. No one else needs to know. No one else deserves to know. Yeah, it's broken in the past. If I was in a situation where the person, survivor, had shared about their compound trauma or secondary events, which they may not see as a separate impact, but more so an extension of the past, etc. In situations like that, whatever they share with me, first of all, feel lucky that they can share it and that they are comfortable around me if there was a time. But they're only sharing it because they trust me. They may only be sharing it in detail to me and no one else before because there is something unique about this situation connection. If they feel safe enough to trust me, that's difficult for them because they may have spent months, if not years, trying to trust people again, only to be let down. That is the one thing I don't want to do. I would never want to let, such as the survivor, down. So there's one area I can do a good job at, is respecting the silence, but also the times when they open up and share whatever. Whether that be me just listening or understanding or more so processing it. The thought of sharing it anywhere else is a big no, in my opinion. It's taken them long enough and hard enough to find someone to share it with. Why would I want to throw that all away? Why would I want to just be another person that lets them down, hurts them in life? It's taken enough strength and energy to survive and still remain and exist in this world till this day, for example. Why would I want to be the one to take that all from them? Or remind them, like how all the other bad people reminded them of, oh, you can't trust this, you can't trust that, you can't be this, you can't be that. I want them to be who they want to be, not who they need to be. There might be many times, and present time too, around friends, family, work, colleagues, clients. They have to perform. They have to be a certain persona with a mask or outside of trauma, just being a certain way. It doesn't have to be like that here. Be who you want to be, not who you need to be or feel you have no choice to be, just oneself. And if being oneself comes with layers of darkness, that's good because it's real, it's pure, there's no BS. And when it's known, then there can be an understanding. And then when there's an understanding, the boundaries can be respected. And when the boundaries can be respected, there is a deeper trust. And with a deeper trust, there can be gentle movement. And with gentle movement, there can be growth. And with gentle growth, there can become closeness. So at the end of the day, where there's certain issues or struggles or limitations or distance or arm's length, ultimately at the end of the day, it can all improve and get closer. It just takes time and it follows a certain order. An order that I don't demand to be sped up, just the hopes and wishes that there is gentle movement towards that direction. That is why certain things can come later. But how the survivor may think or feel in the moment, do I have to do this? Do I have to do that? Oh, I'll make it up to you later. I'm so sorry, I'll make it up to you. You don't have to make anything up. Everything's okay. Just go at it one at a time. If there is a mistake, if there is an error, if there is a misunderstanding, it's fine. It's okay. Understandably, what may have happened in the past, previous partner overreacted, punishment, consequences, and it kind of conditioned the survivor to think or feel a certain way to resolve any tension, conflict, to avoid any darkness or further pain. I get that, but it's a different situation here. You know, I don't know what more to say. But in regard to the physicalness and all of that, that doesn't have to be rushed. If it takes days, weeks, months, that's fine. If it takes over a year, that's fine. What matters most is just being able to be in the presence of them and for them to be comfortable, honest, and somewhat open. That is more important over anything else. That, them being open and feeling safe, is 100 times more important than them feeling they have to or needed to get physically close to me. That part isn't a priority. What is a priority is them being happy or getting closer to that with time. So my thoughts there. In regard to the secondary partner aspect, so in the past, if the survivor had come out of a bad, really bad relationship or lost someone as well in a bad way. Mention about the effects, very difficult in many different ways, but also feeling that loss within and wanting it to be filled, resolved. So possibly rushing into a new relationship in hopes that those problems and pain can be eased or taken away. And furthermore, refilling those holes with new love and new worth. And it can be more intense and strong in the early days once coming out of a first time or deep relationship which ended really badly and they were treated badly. The survivor wants to be loved, wants to be valued and accepted. Nothing wrong with that, very normal. The intensity behind it as well, very normal. Whether it's deemed as a trauma response or not, just a human response, there's nothing wrong with the mind or the heart wanting to be occupied with the presence of another heart or mind. But all that can be said is, when it's rushed, the survivor may not be fully ready for a new connection with someone. Or rushed as in not picking the right person, but because of that intensity and passion early on, that's used to look beyond maybe the imperfections or the darkness, looking beyond the possible bad traits or early warning signs. Later on in life, a survivor could be very cautious, protective, and scanning for threats. Whilst that can be a good trait to have, it just shows the extent of how hurt the survivor must have been, and possibly reoccurring as well, for them to build that defense mechanism to be very cautious. No one should have to be that way, but sometimes people have no choice but to, because of what's happened in the past. And the worse it is, or the more it happens, the more likely they are to be more stronger and firm present time onwards. So if I was with or in the presence of a survivor who was very cautious and protective of themselves, I'd get the arm's length. I would just hope within that with time it could ease, and that they would be able to see the potential, the positives within me, but most importantly, within us together. So it's not one-sided. So it's not a one-way challenge, but a two-way shared resolve along the lines of that. But whilst the survivor has gone through a possible rebound in the past, finding another individual, and it's gone wrong, what could that entail possibly? Similar levels of bad treatment as the first partner. Maybe other areas where there is name calling, or there is, for example, putting the survivor on the spot, putting them in a very difficult or impossible position where the survivor has no choice but to say yes and to comply to the wishes, the needs of that secondary bad partner. And the reason why it's so prominent that is there's a fair chance the survivor, whilst it being quite raw, sensitive and open from their previous wounds and trauma, rushing into a new relationship but genuinely doing it because they want to be loved. That's what's most important with a survivor. They may rush, they may bounce back, they may find someone else, they may find the wrong person, they may be blinded at rose-tinted glasses with that passion to feel it again, to feel that spark, to feel that early rush. There's nothing wrong with that, but it can bypass the possible threats within a wrong partner when getting with them. But nevertheless, the intent behind the survivor's actions is pure and honest. But what are the actions and intent behind the secondary partner? Do they respect the survivor? Well, under this aspect of additional trauma, likely not. And there's likely a chance where the survivor at one point was willing to open up about their previous connection and bad past. What did that secondary partner do? They may have listened, They may have been present, and yet it was completely disregarded and disrespected the moment that secondary partner put and forced the survivor into a difficult position. Now, that could be anything, inside or outside of the house. It could be out and about in public, where the secondary bad partner demands or asks or springs it upon the survivor to go and do something, to perform a certain action, to say something out in public, loud. It could really be anything that the survivor isn't prepared for and certainly doesn't want to do. But in the eyes of the secondary partner, they don't care. They don't respect that. What they want is what they want, and they will get it. So they force and push and prod the survivor into a difficult spot where they've got no choice but to do it. Now, outsiders could say, well, it's easy for the survivor to just say no, to back off, to walk away. But the survivor has already been through hell in the past. They've already lost people in the past in different ways. They've already been made to feel bad in the past if they don't do something, and possibly punishments and consequences when they don't comply. So dealing with that trauma, dealing with the trauma responses, dealing with a new partner and trying to make it work and not wanting to lose them either because of not wanting to be re-traumatized, all the whilst sharing and opening up to that secondary partner, and yet that other partner completely neglects and rejects the wishes of the survivor and instead puts their own selfish needs first in order to be satisfied or pleased in some way. The survivor does what they do because they're in a difficult position where they don't want to say no, because if they say no, they feel like they're letting the other partner down. And if that survivor has been made to think or feel that they're responsible to a previous relationship going wrong or the death of a previous partner, if they've been blamed for that and they've internalized it, they don't want to do anything else. They may fear making the wrong decision or standing up for themselves because it may correlate to losing another person in their life. And they've simply lost one too many people in life. They don't want to go through that again. So the survivor may be more inclined to do things as a means of people-pleasing and satisfying the other half because they don't want to appear as a bad partner and they don't want to lose or disappoint them. It can also lead to avoidance in consequences. The fear of, if the survivor says no, stands their ground, worried how the other partner may react. Will it be negatively? Will it be the cold treatment? Will there be levels of abuse? That survivor has gone through a lot in the past and likely shared it with this new partner. Yet this newer partner, the secondary one, has completely disregarded all of that, because if they really cared and if they really respected the survivor, providing communication was in the early days, they would never put the survivor in such a difficult position where the survivor has to question themselves, their worths and their own values for the sake of saving the relationship. There should be no ultimatums like that and any difficult rock and a hard place moments either. And yet that's what's happened in the past. Right now in the present, I would never want the survivor, if I knew of someone, to feel like they've got to make an ultimatum, but they've got to people please to get or to maintain. You know, the survivor feels they have to people please or make it up to me for the sake of holding and keeping it together. I'd hope that it shouldn't have to be that way, because a connection with someone shouldn't have to just be off just that. It can take days, it can take hours, it can take months, if not longer, to build something special with someone special. Why should it take so long to build, yet so little and so quick to just break it just because of that, that supposed previous example in the past of being made or feeling made to do something that they don't want to do and having no choice? I wouldn't want to repeat that. I wouldn't want them, the survivor, to feel that they're in that position where it's an ultimatum. It's either do this or don't be together, or loss of someone. There's so much more to it than just one little action or one little suggestion. Because in my eyes, I wouldn't want the survivor to be given an ultimatum or be put on the spot, whether that be a surprise, whether it be a shock, because I get, just like with questions and suggestions, a survivor that's put on the spot, even when it's just a question, can lead to brain fog, because it's that performance anxiety and it's that caught off guard. And when caught off guard, the mind isn't ready to respond. The thoughts within are not quite there. So I would never demand or expect to reply immediately. There's more than enough time in this world to reply back a bit later or to think of an idea the next day. There's no rush. I'm not going anywhere. Understandably, the survivor may feel they have to come up with something immediately out of fear of losing the other person. But really, if the connection is something special and meant to be, it lasts longer than that. But the relationship isn't built off a deck of cards, but more importantly, built off layers of bricks and weighted in a right way and insulated as well, metaphorically speaking, maintaining that warmth and connection and it not being hollow like a tree where it's cold within and out, and that demands and expectations are there. It shouldn't have to be that way, but it may have been in the past and the survivor has been conditioned that way. Maybe. But just like with questions and discussions, I personally wouldn't want to put someone on the spot the same way I wouldn't want to physically or in terms of actions put someone on the spot. Nothing has to be done if they don't want to do it. If they want to do it, if I want to do it, if I don't want to do it but they want to do it, then it's not done. If they don't want to do it but I don't want to do it, then it's not done. It's got to be equal. Like with the actions or the decision making, it's just a small microcosm of a much bigger thing, as in the total theme, that it shouldn't be down to control, it shouldn't be down to ultimatums, it should be down to shared discussions and is it right, is it not, is it ready, is it not, and go from there. But it looks like the past completely looked past all of that and disregarded it. And most importantly, if there was ever a time where that survivor opened up back then, clearly it wasn't respected for that secondary partner or anyone else onwards to react or put the survivor in that situation in life, forced to do something or made to feel that they're forced to do something out of fear of loss, out of fear of letting the other person down. An individual that can't do or isn't ready to do something, that doesn't let me down. That doesn't disappoint me. I understand. Now, with that, moving on, the rebound aspect, beside from one partner to another, if the survivor has been made to feel that they're not worthy of being exclusive to someone, that they have to be on the sideline like a third wheel, or to share it with another person, or for it to be some kind of casual, complex or different dynamic. In the presence right now, I don't want half of a survivor. I don't want to share half of the survivor with another person or something else. I want the survivor whole. I am hungry for the survivor whole. Not for that to be taken out of context within reason. As in what was said earlier on. If they are who they are, as in the positive traits, as in just as equal importance, if they respect me, if they don't ridicule me, if they accept me, and even if it's just a thought, want to include me with them, and if they acknowledge and understand, as in strengths, but also more importantly, my weaknesses or my possible limitations, if a person could be like that, well then I wouldn't want just half of them or just parts of them if they were made to think that that's just how or who they'll ever be and that's all they'll ever be and amount to, such as with a new connection with someone. I don't want little pieces or parts. I want the full package, because just like their heart, it's full within. Why would I only want a piece or just a little bit? I want their whole heart. I want everything, within reason, of course. In other words, so it's not taken out of context, that they are more than enough and they're a key individual. In a scenario situation, when around a person like that, they deserve to be, supported, and all the positives, not just bits, but all of it, but also listened to and understood. Some of these aspects are very basic and should be common sense. But how many humans out there upon this earth have common sense and have that depth? Not many. So it's just my thoughts, but I wouldn't want the survivor feeling they can only have parts here or there. I'm just focused on them. I'd hope that they at some point would be able to just focus wholly, that they can be in the presence of me without the limitations in that sense, or without the demons doing all the talking with them. But that's the thing, with these aspects, these elements of past trauma, individual events which can impact the survivor's self-worth and feelings and how they act and go about onwards, I'd listen to each one, as in each story, each example, but it might take me time to process. Me processing or taking time to understand isn't a reflection or negatively of them, or looking down or thinking less of them. To a survivor, that may be quite tense and may want an answer immediately. It might feel like that, but uniquely with myself, it takes time for me to process it and understand. Why? Because I want to understand, and I want to fully understand, so there's no misunderstanding, so there is more peace as well. Because if there's a rushed answer or a rushed response, you haven't got that full understanding. And without a full understanding, certain boundaries won't be respected and certain pathways may be overstepped or crossed because of that lack of understanding. It takes time, especially if it's complex, if it's dark. It demands time to understand in order to show that respect to them. They may want an answer immediately, but for that full closure and that understanding, it takes time as a reflection of the importance of the event, a moment itself, for that said person, what they went through. If what they went through was dark or complex, something complex or dark needs time to be understood and to be processed within. With a better understanding and better processing, there can be greater closeness with one another in the moment. That's how my mind works in life, or even such as with YouTube. It takes time. For something to take time clearly shows it has a layer and a level of importance, and that's how it should be, especially when it's on a serious or sensitive topic. If it's rushed, it shows that there's a lack of care. Just like how we said, when it comes to a survivor who may feel that they've lost their heart or lost themselves and feel numb inside. Well, if that's how they really were, then why do they get those butterflies within when they consider a new person or hear another person's voice say their name? It shows that there is still life within, there is still positives deep inside, it's not all lost. And that's an important reaction, the same way as it's an important reaction as in just listening to the survivor when they open up and so on. When it comes to the rebound effect, where a survivor had done things in the past because they were in a messy situation, things were confusing and complex, and they may have lost themselves in the moment, or they didn't know who they were, or they were trying to find themselves. I don't look back on that in a disappointed way, or I don't look back on that and think less of the survivor. It takes me time to process, just to understand. But what my focus or response would be, you've gone through darkness, you've tried coming out onto the light side. What matters now is right now and forwards. The past is the past, but the struggles that you have faced and continue to face are very important. I get that you can't have one without the other. If you had the trauma but without the pain and suffering, if that was taken away, it's kind of an insult to the survivor that's already gone through hell and felt that hell within, all for nothing. So it makes sense, as in the importance of the events and the impact it can have on a survivor and how it can continue on in life. But a survivor doesn't deserve or shouldn't have to stay in the past. Feelings may follow on, carry over because of the profound effect it's had, but then equally, basing it off that, what happens in the present and onwards with me and that said survivor, hopefully new feelings and new experiences can continue over as well long term to combat the previous feelings and imprint which are negative, for the positives to counter the negatives, to shine a bit of perspective and a different alternative, not just with reasoning and thoughts or CBT, but actual emotions, the contrast between the light and the dark, not to take one away completely, but just to share it in the space of something brand new and different, which adds as a contrast, which can show to the survivor what they've gone through is difficult, valid, understanding, and the impacts it has makes sense. But what happens now, what happens next is just as important, if not more, to rival the darkness, to eventually surpass it with the light, basic positivity, little moments, new experiences which can't be compared to the past, so it can't be lost. Removing that fear of loss, removing those trauma responses, or at least easing it. Like, if the survivor had opened up about deep things which they may feel that they regret, or they may feel a level of guilt or shame for what they've done, or more so they feel deep guilt and shame for offloading it onto me. Me personally, I would never want the survivor to feel deep guilt, shame, or to feel mortified for simply sharing it with me. Whilst maybe how it's delivered or taught about, it might take me time to process and understand it properly. That's just how I am. I can't change that about myself. But if the survivor says what they say simply because they're comfortable, or subconsciously they are comfortable, and that's why certain things slip out the mouth, whilst it may have not been expected and it came across as a surprise or a shock, because that's natural human responses by anyone, just the fact that the survivor could say or share such details in which they may have not told anyone else, for me, I would be proud of them. I wouldn't want them to feel guilt or shame. I would just be proud of them, but also pleased that they can be who they want to be, and also share the past. Because in some ways, opening up about the past and sharing it is showing a sign of moving on. It can be a way of processing unresolved trauma from the past and just simply processing and coming face to face with what's happened back then, and showing that, perspective and reflection in the moment, what they want, what they don't, who they want to be, and what they want to change within their reason and based on what they want to do. But once again, that level of openness just shows how comfortable things must be, which is a huge positive if a survivor can feel that. And if I was in that situation where they were able to share, then I would be, I'd acknowledge them. It would be obviously a very good thing, but understandably it could also be a double-edged sword, because when oversharing or explaining too much, the survivor may feel bad for that. But a survivor should never feel bad for opening up when they've carried the weight of the world and suffered in silence for possible years. They deserve to offload and to release. Because if that survivor is willing to hear me out, if I ever had encounters or the past, if they are there for me, then I would definitely be there for them, because it isn't just one way. It goes both ways at maybe different times. That's what makes it important. Now, in regard to photos, if a survivor has gone through a situation where pictures have been exploited, revealed, weaponized, used against them. Someone online, for example, said all the right words. Survivor may have felt valued and appreciated, something that they've always wanted to feel. You can't blame a survivor for wanting that. But those words were used to deceive, for the bad person to get what they want, maybe photos or a video, whether it be intimate or if it just be a normal photo, and then used against them afterwards, and threats made, don't do this or do that, or they'll be shared, or this will happen. It takes away the survivor's personal safety. It may impact the survivor's personal brand, or how they see themselves, or how they see themselves within the world. That fear of their identity, their true self, in their own skin or their own clothes, etc., could be at risk of being shared with the whole world. Being deceived, feeling that too. Being betrayed, trust broken again. That can be completely traumatizing. It can lead to long-term effects in the future where the survivor may not want to show their face to the world in any way, where the survivor may turn down certain opportunities or areas in life because they feel it risks their identity, even if it was natural. But, just as an example, the actions of a photo shoot or the actions of modeling, a survivor may turn that down or avoid it immediately because it triggers that place where they once were, where they were indirectly modeling, indirectly showing themselves to someone, but in the hopes of it being private, and yet that trust was broken, the boundaries were overstepped, and the bad person ended up, or threatened at least, to do something with them, which isn't good. Whether anything happened or not that came from it, the survivor can be left feeling used, feeling as a personal feeling within, disgusted in themselves that they let it happen. But if a survivor is drunk, what can be done? If a survivor is vulnerable because of psychological struggles in the past, what can be done? It's the role, it's the importance for the more functional one, not to sound bad, but it's the role and the place for the more healthy person to step the hell up and do the right thing, and to not exploit the survivor, to not take advantage of the survivor. If in a normal general setting where two healthy people are in the presence of one another, one individual is drunk, the other person is not. The drunk one may want to do something, the sober one should not follow through. To protect themselves first of all, the way it is in this world, but also to protect the safety of that said drunk person. If both people are sober and there is an agreement, that's fine. But if one person's drunk, the other one isn't, does the drunk one really want to do something? Or does it just feel like that in the moment and then they may later regret it afterwards? As said, for the sake of the sober person protecting themselves first, so there's no false labels or claims made against them, but also out of care and respect of the other person. If that can be applied and done in real life, then why the hell can't it not be done when it comes to a digital situation where a person could be a bit vulnerable? Psychologically speaking, providing on the conditions that struggles were shared openly with the other person to begin with, knowing. Either way, a person who is drunk, psychological issues, or simply functional, regardless of the state of mind or the physical state of that said survivor, we'll call it, it's still down to the responsibility of the other person on the other end to act accordingly. And common sense, common logic is, if you receive photos, don't be sharing them public, don't be sharing or reposting them elsewhere. There's a reason why that said person shared the photos with you privately in the first place, because it actually meant something in the moment or maybe long term. By sharing them elsewhere, you're disrespecting the uniqueness of this moment. You're disrespecting that survivor. You're kind of disrespecting yourself based on having certain standards or what there should be, on like the baseline of it. I'm just trying to cover every angle, if that makes sense. But like, such as in a situation where a survivor is complimented, made to feel safe, there could be that rebound effect, that burst of intensity, wanting to give more, wanting to do more, more persuaded and more convinced, because they actually feel that there is something going on in the moment, even if it's just in the moment. So they do stuff because they want to, or they feel that they want to, like if they were drunk. But then it's weaponized against them for that. Weaponized and punished for them being open, loose, and free. Now, there could always be times where survivor may be drunk, may share photos, the other person on the other end may not do anything bad with the photos, but they may disregard the wishes of that said survivor, that when they come back round afterwards and think, oh shit, what did I do? Did I really share those photos? Did I really take those photos? They may hate themselves, they may blame themselves, but the right thing to do, it is communication and conditions for the other person to delete those photos. Because it's one of those things, the other person doesn't have to do anything or weaponize anything. But if the survivor feels or regrets what they've done, what they've said, if there's true respect mutually, well then when the person comes around and says, can you delete them? Can you get rid? Don't, the other person should follow through with it, and then it's clean slate. Would you say no harm done? Well, with respect, the survivor may still struggle or suffer, but that might be more of a trauma response to the past, how they were made to feel back then, how they feel right now. Self-blame or overly apologetic, depending. Every situation can be different, but at the end of the day, one thing that should remain a constant is if photos are shared, the other person should keep them private, or better, delete them after. So, in a situation, let's get a quick little drink. If in a situation where the survivor was to share photos with me, that could be of the face, it could be of the sky, it could be of a cat, it could be of anything. If they was to say delete it after, that's exactly what I do. Because if you respect them, if the connection is supposed to mean something, then there will be those boundaries understood. Especially if you know what they've gone through in the past, then even more so, it would make sense to follow through with it accordingly. And just by default, if photos were more intimate, for example, I would naturally and automatically delete them afterwards. Not because of being disgusted, not because of being rude. Some people could see it as rude. Oh, how dare you delete photos when I've sent them to you? I'm deleting the photos because I want to protect myself first of all, and equal in importance, I want to protect you. Because even if it's private, digitally, things can be hacked. Or even if it's private, if I was to lose my phone, what if someone found it and picked it up and then started looking through it? What good does that do? It could compromise me, but more so it could compromise the survivor. Sometimes the safest thing to do is to delete it shortly afterwards. As for the consideration of sharing it or weaponizing it as a bargaining chip, that should never be done in the first place, because the reality is, the moment anything like that is done and crossing over the line is the moment that connection, that friendship or that relationship is completely dead. And there might be a pattern where that survivor has been made to feel appreciated, acknowledged, validated, complimented. Survivor genuinely believes in it, which is normal and understandable, wanting to be loved, and then yet it was taken after because it was like a facade. It was faked because the other person did what they did, said what they said, did all the right things to get what they wanted. And when they didn't get what they wanted, or they didn't get more, that's when they threatened the survivor. They show their true colours. But in a situation where if someone was to share photos with me, they get deleted shortly afterwards. Unless the other person specifically said, don't delete them, well then there'll be an understanding. But then still, depending what the photos are, I'd probably still delete them to protect myself and to avoid anything going wrong. I might scan the room for threats. I may not have PTSD. I may not have this or that, but I am extremely cautious. You want to know why? When I'm doing my YouTube videos, if I was to wear sunglasses outside or inside, I'm going to close all the curtains because those sunglasses will reflect what is outside the window. So people watching the video would look into the sunglasses and be able to see what's all around. I don't want to compromise myself there. For most part of it, I'll consciously try and be careful. I try, whether that be in the shed or in this room, I try to always avoid any barcodes or QR codes showing in the background from a product, an item, out of the worry of would someone try scanning it on screen to try and trace or track where that item came from to try and find the location. In some areas in life, I go above and beyond and extra cautious, beyond cautious more than what you could imagine. So with that, I do have that understanding that when it comes to a survivor, their safety, their privacy comes first. Despite what I may want or wish for, what's more of a priority is for the survivor, if I knew them, to be comfortable and to know what they want or what they're ready to do or share, etc., if that makes sense. And if photos are shared, that's obviously appreciated and valued beyond, but I'll still be careful and maybe too careful just to be safe in many different ways. It might come across as boring, but that's just how I am. But what if there was a situation where the survivor never shared photos, but equally they never asked for photos? Well, that just shows, they're a good person, they don't take, they don't demand, they might not be able to give, but it's balanced, it's equaled. Again, it may not always be like that, but yeah. I wouldn't demand for photos, but in a way, subconsciously, I would hope things can change in the future just as a microcosm for a connection overall. Photos don't define the whole relationship or connection, but it's the photos which can apply a name to a face to a name, that, milestone. Because within reason and within respect, you need to know who you're talking to and who you're looking at, especially if it's digitally to begin with. If it's a complete default profile picture, it's not fair on the other half. You need to know who you're talking to so you can trust them, just so they can trust you too. It needs to be shared both ways. Now, in my situation with being a YouTuber, a content creator for YouTube, TikTok, etc., I put myself out there, my voice, my face, and part of my behavior and personality. So people do get an easy ticket in learning about me. But the other way around, it's not the same, is it? So it can be difficult, it can be challenging. And sometimes it's like, deep down, it's that one, oh, I wish this could happen, I wish that could happen. It can't be helped because it's a normal human response. Wanting this or that from the survivor without expressively demanding for it just shows how important the situation is and how much I value them, and the connection to want more shows how much I like them and appreciate them, even when they open up about the darkness. So certain wants and needs aren't a bad thing, it's a positive, but how you go about it is what's important. So when photos can't be shared because of those reasons in the past, it makes complete sense. When things in the moment, like in real life, if like progressing in the future, not that every situation is social media orientated, but just the actions of taking photos and exchanging or taking a selfie together, that might be a step too far because of that feeling of the past, the feeling of overexposure. To a survivor, they may want to live a quiet life. Nothing wrong with that. To a survivor, they may want to appear very small online so they don't share or open up too much. In an online relationship, that can be complex. But if bypassing that or moving on in real life, then it's different. But the actions of taking photos or taking photos together, it's not a demand. There is always an alternative to make memories. The memories can be made within the heart and the mind. That photos don't need to be created just to remember a good time, because for as long as you're with that said person, those memories will remain there and will be felt and shared regardless. But the alternatives would be, if you can't take a photo with that said person, you take a photo of the sky and what's ahead. Because taking photos, making memories is a good thing, but making memories together in the moment and they foreshadow the future, as in taking a photo of what's ahead and what you're looking at ahead, is a metaphor and a symbolism of what you two can do together onwards, showing you're not looking back in the past, you're not looking back at pain, you're looking forwards. So not just through photos, not just through actions, but through the symbolisms, it all links together as one. And as well, if in a situation in public and a photo wanted to be taken, or I wanted to take a photo, instead of taking a photo of faces where it could be overexposed or that pressure, take a photo of just two hands being held together. You can't identify who's who, you can't tell who it really is. So you can make memories, you can document things, and it can be done anonymously too. And just in my situation, it's different for everyone. Just because I am, well, I'm not an influencer, but just because I am a content creator and I'm out there digitally, doesn't mean every part of life has to be digitally shared either. In a relationship or in connections with a survivor who may not be in those roles or areas, it can be quite daunting and scary. The thought of a person being online or sharing or being open, what else will be shared online too? It can be a trigger. So there might be reluctancy there indirectly because of the past and because of the dynamics here. I get that. There wouldn't be disappointment, there wouldn't be demand. As said, every situation is different, every role is different, so these complexities and these barriers can be faced differently and more or less challenges along the way. Yeah. But as said, like videos made about cases, about countries, about elsewhere, not about all me, not about the background, because it's separating the two. Just like when it comes to a connection with a survivor, their past and the present right now can be separated. Survivor shouldn't have to live in fear, shouldn't have to live in discomfort, shouldn't have to be held back by the past, and shouldn't have to feel bad about any of the past. Should be able to breathe, to just remain still, and then slowly make the next move. Not alone, but together. But the survivor doesn't have to walk alone anymore. It's like that in different ways. Probably went on a bit too long about that. But besides photos, stalking, that can be another traumatic event for a survivor, digital or in real life, where it leads to the survivor feeling unsafe where they may be. It can lead to the survivor feeling jumpy whenever there's a sound, whenever there's sudden movement, whenever a person whooshes on by quickly, or that hypervigilance of you're out on a walk, you're out for a jog, and you see someone, and then you see them later, and then again. They might just be walking in the same direction or doing a similar activity independently, but to a survivor, hyper-cautious, hyper-vigilant, are they another stalker? Are they out to get me? Are they following me? Do they have an agenda? It's perfectly normal and understandable. For a survivor of trauma or for a survivor of just stalking, the trauma it can carry is great. It's just like the same way, I'm just using a specific example here, is if you had a female or females or a group that were out somewhere and something bad happened, whether it be daytime or more so nighttime, something physical, something verbal, and it ended bad, it can lead to the females feeling unsafe, cautious, worried, next time they're out or out somewhere, they might flinch, they might scream, they might pull the phone out to blend in or to get the phone number ready to call for help. They may cross the road, they may speed up walking, they may run away, they may not give direct eye contact, they may appear defensive. In the presence of a complete different stranger male who means no harm, who doesn't mean to cause any problems. And yet, there's that defensiveness. But that might just be because they've gone through stuff in the past and there's triggers in the present. And I'll just be honest, there's been times where when I've been out somewhere or just simply walking, and unfortunately there is a person in front of me, I want to overtake them. But as soon as I start walking faster, they do too. It could be a trauma response. It could be a defensive mechanism. I simply want to overtake because they're walking a bit too slow. But the moment I walk fast, they may feel subconsciously I'm following them. I'm a threat. So then they walk fast as well. And if they walk faster and I'm trying to walk faster, I can't overtake them. It's awkward, isn't it? I mean, other examples, just being very honest, like times in the past when going to college, walking to school, if I had to get my phone out to check the time, I dreaded it. Why? Because times where there might have been groups of people in front of me walking, I dreaded the idea of checking the time, or if I needed to either make a call or check messages, whatever it might be. I felt I couldn't, because the fear of, if I pull my phone out and I'm holding it like that, what if the person or people in front of me turn round and think that I'm taking a photo of them or video recording them? Whilst it can be difficult for females in different ways when dealing with dodgy males, it can be also awkward for males dealing with, because of how other males fuck up in life and give other males a bad name, vice versa, both ways, different genders, you know? So it's like, I need to check the time, I need to send a message, but I can't get the phone out because if I do, I'm worried that someone will look round. Basically, I'm overthinking it, I'm being hyper cautious, hyper vigilant, but you can see the avoidance to avoid any negative consequences, avoidance in being misunderstood, avoidance in personal safety in different ways. It's different for everyone. Or like if there's a person walking down a path, a road, and I'm walking this towards them, sometimes I might cross over. Do they fear me? Are they disgusted in me? Are they scared? It might be, but it might not be personal. But it might feel like that. But it depends what they've gone through in the past. Or the person's walking by, they pull the phone out and I'm thinking, I know why. For protection, in case anything went wrong. I'm just here to walk by. I'm just here to get from point A to point B. But the way people are so hyper-vigilant and very cautious and defensive, you can only imagine what it would be like for a survivor that's gone through hell and back. You can't expect them to change. You can't expect them to drop things. You can't expect them to give and do stuff. I wouldn't, at least. So when it comes to stalking, the effects it has on a survivor, made to feel unsafe, made jumpy, worried if there's an agenda, worried if there's any deceiving, any compliments. Are they doing it because they want something? Are they doing it to get close and then to strike? That's what can lead to a person's online presence being deleted, removed for personal safety. Maybe they shouldn't have to, or they didn't want to, but they've been left with no choice. Can make it more restrictive in a sense, but I get. But it's the same with location. If they were stalked in real life, a survivor is probably less likely to give their location away or to share it, even with someone that they trust, because of the demons within and the cautiousness talking. I don't take it personal. I don't see it as rude or an insult. They're doing it to protect themselves, which is very normal and understandable. They shouldn't have to be put in that position, but it's how life has gone. All I would hope for down the line is that despite the arm's length, that one's own actions and consistency would be enough to warm the coldness and to maybe slowly melt that defense, that armor within them, naturally within reason. Does that make sense? Just be done slowly with time, because it's one of those things. A survivor does what they do to protect themselves, but for as long as it stays that way, there's not much I can do, as in helping or supporting or getting closer, and vice versa equally, because it's shared. For as long as a survivor protects themselves, but overprotects themselves, they're also technically denying themselves of that new experience. And sometimes new experiences can have a healing effect. So indirectly, a survivor might be denying themselves of a form of healing because the demons talk too loud. The cautiousness within is too strong. It overshadows the wants, the needs, and the desires. So I just hope that with time, that there was a level of openness, but the order, how it goes, it can't be demanded immediately. I wouldn't expect it to. You know, it's different for every occasion, situation, but if a survivor was able to share a bit about themselves or their backstory for how they are or how they feel, that's what's most important first. Establishing the present or the past, understanding them better, knowing what to expect and what not. When you expect and you understand, there can't be disappointment, there can't be frustration. It is what it is. There can still be that inner frustration with life, but it's not personal to the survivor. Like, I'll just give you my raw thoughts. If there was arm's length, if there was trauma responses, it would hurt, but more so the aspect of life, that they had to go through such hell to be where they are now and to act or feel how they do. The complexities, the darkness, the struggles, and how it can get in the way of the present for me, but also most importantly for them. Frustrated with life. Me pissed off, not with them, but pissed off with knobheads in the past that acted the way they did to make that survivor how they felt and onwards. That, you know, the connection is natural and everything. If all the events from the past were taken away, likely most of the trauma would as well. So then there wouldn't be as many reasons to have that arm's length. So indirectly, and this is a selfish thought, but this is just an honest one, because of previous partners or previous friends or previous strangers that abused, used, deceived that survivor, those people from the past, those ex-partners, they're the problem. They have fucked it up for me right now because of other people's incompetence. Other people's incompetence has ruined it in the moment. Now, of course, you can't just blame everything on one thing. There's many different factors to take in mind. And once again, in some areas with respect, it's the survivor in the present to be able to eventually identify the past as the past and the present as the present, and what's good and separate it from what's bad, to be able to identify that. It's very complex, but, you know, at some point the survivor could or should be able to at least see the difference between the past and the present, or at least efforts or attempts made. A survivor is a survivor, and everything that they've gone through is real, but equally, a new situation, a new environment, a new partner, there should at least be that basic level of respect and trust over time, you know? Got to go both ways, can't be one-sided. It's not about being harsh, strict, or cold, but it's about maintaining that self-respect as well, on top of respecting them too, because you can get lost in it at times. So got to keep the balance there within reason to keep it healthy. Now, in terms of legal aspects, re-traumatization from the past, understandably that can be hard if it's letters or follow-ups or confrontations, or maybe more extended socially, whether that be legal or not. I can't take over. It's not my story. It's not my thing. I can't take over. It's for them to do what they need to do. But just to be there to support them or to provide perspective, that's what I would do. If I was in the presence of a survivor that needed a second opinion or a bit of perspective, that's exactly what I would do. But I would do it in the lens of balancing it out, almost disconnecting. I would disconnect my love towards someone if it meant giving a balanced perspective so they could make the healthiest choice or decision within their control. Does that make sense? Because like with true crime, like with mysteries, you're covering a case, you can't be emotionally invested or connected because it can blind your judgment, it can blind, facing the reality. So just like with a relationship, which can be impossible at times or very difficult to disconnect, I do have that ability, and that's exactly what I would do during very important times and moments. If they had to make a decision, they had to consider something, and they needed or wanted my opinion, I would disconnect in the moment just to weigh it up. Pros, cons, strengths, weaknesses, who's at play, who's present, and who isn't. I would not use the bias connection and say, right, do this and do that. Disconnect from this, disconnect from that. That would be too much of an influencing effect and impact, and whilst they may value my opinion, it wouldn't be natural. And it could be considered indirectly controlling, because the very thing that people did in the past was controlling, ordering the person to do this and that and to make decisions and to cut ties with people. That wouldn't be my role. My role would just be to weigh it up, provide an absolute balance with a holistic output, so then the survivor knows exactly what's on the table with their own thoughts as well, so they can make the best decision possible, or at least try to, with what they know and with their final action. And tying on with the aspect of arm's length when dealing with a toxic family or toxic friends, when a survivor is caught in a rock and a hard place. I've said previously I wouldn't want to put someone in a difficult position, but then at the same time, a survivor shouldn't have to deny their own happiness for the sake of pleasing other family members or friends that hold a candle to the past. It's the survivor's life to live, so they should have the choices on what they want to do. It's their mind, it's their body. Not mine, but in terms of just the support without taking over, that would be done. If a survivor felt restricted or kind of trapped, they know what they wanted, but other people were in the way, within reason, I would absolutely defend myself beyond, because I know my ability, just like how I defend myself on YouTube against cretins and mere mortals. Within reason, that's exactly what I would do if it meant defending the survivor against their own connections. I'm not the disruptor. I'm not going to tear things apart, but within reason, I'm going to defend, because I wouldn't like the idea of other mortals denying me, but more importantly, denying the survivor of what's important. Because if the past has already played a role in making things difficult, why on earth should any other human on this planet right now and onwards make it any more difficult? It's none of their business, but they make it their business. They overstep the line, it's time to defend. But of course, it's got to be done within reason to avoid triggering the survivor, to avoid putting them in an even more difficult position. There might be times where not much can be done, or there's a time and place for it all. That's why, despite passion or despite connection, sometimes you've got to disconnect or slow things down to get the best outcome. If you want to talk about legal re-traumatization and it being brought up from the past, references there, or it be something brand new to avoid any further problems or difficulties. Managing it, but you can't be perfect, of course. But with my experience on YouTube and how I've dealt with humans within reason, bit more experience here, a lot more under control here. And, you know, on the sideline, people do say when I do my videos at times, oh, you're getting all worked up and frustrated. That's me being calm. Yeah. But when it comes to dealing with humans properly, less swearing, less insults, because there would only be signs of losing an argument with someone. It's just got to be, or at least try to be, handled correctly. And when there's other people at play or in the presence, got to consider those as well. Anyway, beside that, work. When it comes to a survivor working, or at some point working, depending on what's going on in life, that can be traumatizing as well. Even if they like what they do or they once liked their job, it can be traumatizing, depending on the roles. If a survivor has clients, there could be trauma dumping, where a survivor may have felt bad for oversharing with a partner. There might have been times where clients overshared or shared how their day was with the survivor, as in having a bad day or losing someone or going through a breakup or going through something very sad and painful. The survivor is there to provide a service and communicate to an extent, but it can also mean being open and prone to triggers. And for a survivor who likely has or gained deep empathy for their own struggles in life, they will probably be able to relate to people in the moment. But in relating and having empathy, it's like a sponge. You're soaking it all up. One person's problems become your own. One person's struggles are now felt by you. Because the survivor has that empathy, they pick up on the dark energy. They pick up on other people's suffering and they feel bad. They might not be able to do much about it, but they feel the other person's pain. And the survivor carries that through them through the day. The more the survivor works, and if they overwork to escape trauma, their own personal trauma, they're now exposing themselves to secondary trauma. Someone else's trauma and struggles, the survivor is now sponging it up and feeling all the struggles of another person, whilst at first it might be a distraction from their own problems, because they say you can hate life or you can struggle, but once you know that there are other people out there who are worse off, it can make you feel a bit better about yourself. But to an empath, to a survivor, short term maybe, but long term, that trauma becomes secondary trauma. And whilst it's separate to their own, it becomes joint. It becomes part of their struggles on top of someone else's struggles, and it creates a vicious cycle. So that original trauma response of overworking, which could lead to illness itself and being off work and a functional collapse, even if that wasn't on the table immediately, a trauma response of overworking to escape the stillness and the intrusive thoughts, whilst that can work to an extent, now the survivor has indirectly opened themselves up to another form of trauma, secondary trauma dumping by the hands of other people, other potential survivors. The survivor may feel that they can handle it in the moment, and that's understandable, but everybody has a mental capacity limit, and everyone has a possible breaking point. And when a survivor is already dealing with struggles already and unprocessed trauma themselves, the unprocessed trauma that they've repressed deep in here could actually surface whilst at work if they're indirectly chatting with a client or a colleague who has gone through something similar, and it's triggered a memory fragment in here to the survivor. That's why sometimes a survivor may have a worse day than usual, because their own trauma has been triggered by someone else's, which creates secondary trauma. That unprocessed thoughts and feelings within have now surfaced to the survivor because of another person experiencing something similar. And it's acted as a trigger, which has activated what's in here, which the survivor didn't know about. And now the survivor is feeling it, but they might not be able to apply what it links to. So it leads to confusion. It leads to that feeling, supposedly, of their health, their life is getting worse, and they punish themselves or they feel that they're too broken. This is really important. Like how I said previously, A survivor could try and get therapy or reach out for CBT, but if the survivor is dealing with complex PTSD, or they're just simply not ready for true therapy, or their mind and body is preoccupied, the therapy isn't going to work immediately. It might be the wrong time for that type of treatment. It might need to be applied at a later point. But the breakdown in communication, the survivor is just going to assume that the very thing to save them isn't possible, so they must be broken. If that can't help them, then nothing can. But it can help them at a later point in life. Maybe what's important and needed in the moment is an alternative form of treatment. Well, it's the same mindset for a survivor that's dealing with unprocessed trauma. If they're triggered at the workplace or with clients, unresolved trauma, fragments and memories suppressed in the mind and shut out. When a fellow client has gone through something similar, how it's described, what's mentioned could trigger the survivor's own previous problems. But they may not know immediately, they may just feel it. They may feel worse before they come round to understanding why they feel that way. But without that closure, and feeling worse, it makes or convinces the survivor that they're getting worse and life is getting worse. But maybe life isn't getting worse, and maybe their health isn't getting worse. It's just that an interaction has touched a nerve which that survivor has never been able to process or heal from. It's something to consider. It's not always a sign of things are getting worse. It's a sign of the opportunity to get better, but the survivor needs to know why they feel that way and why it links and applies to them. That's why communication is needed somewhere. And if I was in a position where a survivor has been working or being busy, at a point or time where there could be communication and conversation about how the day was without the survivor feeling that they've got to hide it or pretend to be okay because they don't want to drag me down, for me, it's important for me to know how they really are and not for them to perform and be the perfect person. I don't want them to be perfect. I want them to be real. I want them to be honest. I don't want them to suffer in silence, etc. But when it comes to the trauma dumping, the secondary trauma, and how it could activate fragments within their own mind, and it might just be my ability because not everyone is capable, but if I knew of a survivor who had a bad day or things were worse than usual or they were listening to certain clients and it felt a bit toxic or triggering, I would want to know so then I could compare and contrast to what I know about the survivor and try and find what could be causing it. Not for me to be a therapist, not for me to take over, but for me to get an idea of what could cause it and then to share it with the survivor as perspective, and then the survivor does what they need to do with that without me taking over, you know? Most people are incapable of doing that. Most humans out there will just rush to the idea of being with someone when they're at their best and abandoning them when they're at their worst. I want to be present 24/7, good and bad. There's a reason why I said in a post some months back, in quotations, I want to be a part of your storm and chaos to weather it equally. Every word that was said then still applies right now. That's just in general, but it links to this scenario as well, if that makes sense. Weather the storm, understand the storm, find a way through it. Not individually, but together, within reason. But if it's not just trauma dumping and what a survivor goes through secondary, whether it be the stress of work, the stress of low episodes, a freeze, overworking, burnout, many different reasons it could lead to being off work. I would want the survivor to know that how I see them and how I think of them, nothing's changed whatsoever. Or more so like a deep freeze, nothing has changed how I think or feel about them. And yeah, I know, by default you could say, well, you should be supporting them regardless and you should be there for them regardless. Yeah, of course. But to a survivor and their mindset and how they feel, everything can feel minimized and everything can feel uncertain, especially with the uncertainty and what they've gone through in the past. So reassurance sometimes is needed. So indirectly speaking, in a scenario, if I knew of someone that was off work, unable to function the same, how I think of them hasn't changed. If they ever shared or opened up about it, or just like with previous struggles, how I think of them doesn't decrease, it only increases. I think more of them in a positive way. But just by default, I don't think less of them, I think good of them. Does that make sense? Doesn't change. Whether they're working or not, it doesn't change how I see them. Because everything that they've gone through, and if they have pushed their body to the absolute limit, mentally and physically, and using all that energy and capacity up, maybe, just maybe, when the body crashes and collapses, and there is burnout, once, twice, no matter how many times, if they've pushed themselves too far and too long, and going through that functional freeze of pretending to be okay and pretending to push on when maybe time out is needed, maybe the body and mind is screaming for a break. And now finally, that's what's happening. But understandably, a survivor may want to keep moving. I get that. I would just hope that if in a situation of knowing someone that collapses or crashes, it's not the end of the world, that nothing changes between me and them. It is some form of communication, some form of basic respect to be able to regather and find a way through, without taking over, right? Now, separately, whether it links to this or separate appointments, whether that be health related or aspects of therapy, depending what the survivor has gone through and deals with, health, breathing issues, lungs, or certain other areas, that do I think less of them? No. But do I understand that it can be a trigger and traumatizing? Yeah. Traumatizing as in they may fear or feel that they want to be the perfect person and the healthiest individual about, because they feel that that's what I'm deserving of, but I don't need them to be 100% mentally, physically healthy. I just hope that they can be honest at least, and then to go from there. But alternatively, appointments, hospital visits. A survivor may say it's not their number one place to be because of the waiting times, the times out, the energy levels, being in busy places, the temperature being really hot and warm. Not an ideal place to be. But I understand it can have an underlying triggering effect. For a survivor that may have gone through loss and may have also gone through certain injuries and negative events in the past, which may have coincided with a hospital visit. For example, if a survivor had been badly treated by the other half, bad ex-partner, was hospitalized, and when the nurse or the doctor said, "How did you get those injuries? How did you get a broken rib? How did you get a dislocated shoulder?" Without you even getting the chance to say anything, the other half spoke and said, "Oh, they walked into a door. Oh, they tripped over. Clumsy them yet again." What does that do to the survivor? Where they go to get help, the darkness follows them. Where they go to get help and heal was all caused by the past or the bad partner. And at times, the bad partner may have accompanied the survivor to that said hospital to make sure the cover wasn't blown, to put on that perfect couple display, to excuse the injuries and say, "Oh, it's by accident, it's something else," when really it was by the hands of that bad partner. For a survivor that goes to hospital or appointments in the future, when it might just be a normal health issue, a struggle, asthma or lungs or an X-ray or a CT contrast scan or anything like that, when they go to that place or a separate place, it can be triggering, as in the thoughts of, I'm in this environment, and the last time I was in this environment, it was for a completely different reason, and it was to do with trauma, a traumatic event. Connecting events with locations and locations with negative feelings, it can make the survivor feeling unsafe, It can be triggering. I can understand the depth. Or the aspect of loss, losing someone or losing people, and maybe it correlating to a hospital visit or going into hospital at the time it's going on. Going into that hospital and feeling that wall as it hits you. The environment should be clinical and sterile and safe. But in the mind of a survivor, it can be uncertain, it can be unsafe, it can be triggering because of how the environment or the type of environment correlates to a past trauma. It carries over just like the feelings. So that in its own right can be triggering. And then therapy, that in its own right, going to a session, dealing with the unknown and building a rapport with the therapist or the counsellor, that can be triggering for a survivor because they have to recount and tell the stories of the past and then do the homework in listening to the past and the tapes recorded and the CBT. Bringing it all back up again, it becoming very real to the survivor. Just like going to the hospital for a visit, going to the doctors for a checkup, but coming back, those feelings associated with the past. It's a trigger. It can be difficult. So that's the depth it can go to. If I was in a situation where I knew of a survivor that had to be somewhere or to, go to an appointment within reason and only providing they were okay with it, I would join them, or I would be beside them every single time, because it just, in my eyes, it just seems the default thing to do. Unless they said, no, I need to do this myself, then okay. But I'd hope to think that they would be okay with it, and seeing that depth of how it can trigger, as in a certain environment, to be in the presence of them, just to be light-hearted, to cut through any darkness, to be able to do that, to create little distractions, to build a portable bubble, to incorporate that. Like what I said, in a situation where if I knew of someone that had a panic attack, to check for the signs, the body language, to do it discreetly. But the same can apply to an appointment, a hospital, a visit. Survivor could be a bit worried or nervous or a bit pissed off because of where they have to be. But it doesn't all have to be dark. Or it be a distraction, talking about football, talking about anything other than the place that they're in. Making a funny joke, being a bit random, cutting through the darkness. You can cut through the darkness in true crime, in cases where there's death involved and murder and really dark stuff. That can help people, even strangers. If that can help strangers, then just imagine what it could do for someone that actually knows you and has a deeper connection. So just in my eyes, when it's above board and it's accepted and it's acknowledged, I personally would want to be by their side for every appointment and visit, whatever that may be, because it just seems like the default thing and what should be done, but not always the case. It's about checking for the signs and what the other person wants, not wanting to create that suffocating atmosphere, still providing that space and the boundaries, of course, because, for example, a therapy related thing, it's their journey, their struggle, they may deal with it themselves. That's understandable. But that's where it ties in a way, with the hyper independence of all areas in life. Hyper independence at first can seem good, can seem powerful and strong, but taking on so much, dealing with so much alone, can really stress the body and mind and can lead to a crash, can lead to a full system crash, paralysis, and much more for a survivor and even a non-survivor. If I simply knew of someone or was with an individual that displayed those traits, I would hope that certain things could be shared and certain responsibilities could be shared in different ways and for different reasons. Sometimes a survivor may be hyper-independent simply because they don't want to worry anyone around them. But it's important to worry because the other person cares. And sometimes there's more worry when the person doesn't know what's going on with the survivor. Longer term, there is deeper worry and panic when you don't know what's wrong or what's happening with the survivor. Everyone's different, but I like closure so I can understand better, so I worry less, and so I am more at peace. It's not always possible, but it's just my mind. That can be upside down, turning the tables upside down for a survivor that has learned to live and learned to adapt by not worrying anyone, by keeping things together and holding it together. But to me, that feels isolating, and that's just my thoughts. When a person struggles alone, when a person deals with it alone, when a person battles on alone, to me, in my opinion, it could be a possible isolating experience, because it's like you're supposed to be connected, but not at the same time. I get why they do what they do, and it makes complete sense, but it's just that hope that with time, things could warm up a little. And hope that the survivor knows that I'm not going to panic if they was to say how they are or what they're doing in that sense. So for the benefit and the sake of the survivor, they don't feel they have to push things, they don't have to hide stuff, they don't have to suffer in silence, because that in its own right can build additional pressure and be traumatizing. It can be traumatizing to feel that you're on the outside looking in at yourself, at a potential of a relationship, but imprisoned by where you're really at and what you feel that you can't do, or the limitations, when the hopes are being able to surpass that. Very complex, I get. And just to reiterate what I said like some previous time again, when it comes to a freeze response, where a survivor may shut the whole world out, shut everyone out, choose to be completely alone because they can't cope, they can't deal with it, too much pressure, too much stress, too much noise, triggers trauma, and as well, not being able to function anymore, locked away in the house, away from it all, away from everyone. Along the lines of that, if I knew of someone in that place, in that position, I would never think less of them. I might not know that's the situation that they're in, but just as a scenario, if I knew, or if that was the case for the survivor, how I think and feel about them originally would still apply now. The positives, it would never change. Because yeah, there's distance, and yeah, it feels empty and silent, and that is difficult, but as difficult as it is for me, and hard as it is, equally, it'll be just as hard for them. Because likely they don't want to be in that position. They don't want to be freezing up. They don't want to be clamming up. They don't want to be collapsing or feeling paralyzed. They certainly don't want to be in a Groundhog Day. But things got on top of stuff and overpowered them possibly. And under those conditions, and struggling and suffering beyond, well, first of all, they don't deserve to suffer, but second of all, they don't deserve any frustration or criticism from me, because first of all, there isn't any to begin with under those conditions, but second of all, they don't deserve to suffer any more than what they're already doing, because they're already going through hell. I get that. Under those conditions, if I knew of someone in that place, in that position, where they feel that they're sinking, I still respect them. And in some ways, if there was ever a time where the survivor had pulled away or pulled the plug because they didn't want to worry anyone, and they didn't want to let anyone down, and ultimately they made the sacrifice of sacrificing their own wants, needs and desires because of other reasons or trauma, they sacrificed the very thing that they wanted, like a connection with me, I would respect them massively. It's complex, it's difficult, it can be a bit confusing, but I would respect them because of that ultimate sacrifice they made, with the belief of they didn't want to drag me down with their darkness. Now, I can't speak for them, and I can't speak directly to them in that situation because of that distance. But in a situation, what I would say in general is, your darkness can't push me away. It only brings me closer. Your dark past, your trauma, in regard to the past doesn't push me away. It brings me closer. However, what unfortunately pushes me away is the very thing that I'm not in control of myself. And that's the trauma response of a deep freeze. That's not about blaming the survivor. It's just about being honest and the awareness. But very likely the survivor knows it already, but feels that is better than remaining and being present because of the long-term fear of consuming or negatively impacting the other half who they care about. So as hurtful and painful as it is, it's better to pull the plug now than to drain the other person completely down the line. But at the end of the day, if the person has the stamina, the depth, the energy, and the balance, then it shouldn't be a problem. It comes down to perspective. It needs to come down to self-reflection, ultimately. Putting aside the darkness, putting aside all the fears and the worries. It's very hard to do, but if a survivor was just to put themselves into the shoes of someone else for a moment, to just breathe, to take it in, to be in the shoes of another person struggling, if they were to put the struggles, worries, fears, and everything all to one side, what does the survivor ultimately want? What do they desire? What do they feel? What does their heart want? What does their mind secretly want? And depending on that situation, if it's positive, for example, to hold on to that as tight as possible and to remind oneself of those needs and those desires, especially when the demons talk too loud, especially when the initial trauma response is, I need to shut everyone out because I don't want to panic or worry or hurt anyone. It's not being selfish, it's not being bad, it's putting yourself first whilst considering and acknowledging the importance, such as another person in the atmosphere, in the world, within reason. If there's a connection, if there's an understanding to begin with, that's got to mean something, right? Something to consider down the line. Anyway, the next thing is, and it wasn't done in this particular order of a trauma struggle, as in secondary or more so additional individual traumatic events, but I've left this one last because it's the deepest one and it might be triggering. So just as a heads up, it might be a bit deep, this, but I just wanted to give you a heads up. You know, the last video that I did where touching upon losing a loved one, how that can be traumatizing in its own right. Not the original traumatic event, but future ones. Post-original trauma, post-PTSD, when other separate events occurred at different times. Losing someone unexpectedly or losing more than one person can be very challenging on a survivor, and the pain can be very real and still continue on till this day. And that can't be taken away because it's very real and important. And like not being able to share things and open up when dealing with other struggles and problems, feeling alone, having to adapt and having to become hyper independent because the very people you looked up to let you down, hurt you, and then the other key people are just no longer present because of unexpected factors in life. Now, in terms of my thoughts on that, if I knew of a survivor that has gone through loss, profound loss, and they still struggle till this day, what can I do? What would I do? Or at least what would I think? What perspective would I provide? In terms of certain actions, I would never push for the past or their connections to be explained because it could be triggering. But if there was ever a time for them to talk about happier memories or moments, good ones or funny times, then I would encourage that and listen. But what I would consider and do when it comes to the anniversaries, the suggestion of if they wanted to go somewhere to reflect or needing to visit somewhere like a location or place which could hold memories or a value to the past within reason, whether that be for me to stand by their side or to stand afar whilst they talk to the atmosphere. I get it, and do what needs to be done. I'd get that. Or if it meant doing a certain action or a certain activity or something which reminded them of the past without it overstepping the lines, without it overshadowing. Being able to repeat something back then and do it in the moment right now in a safe, controlled environment to feel a little bit closer to if they've got former family members or friends within reason. In terms of the perspective then, the loss is present physically and mentally. But if I knew of a survivor, if I was with someone, the perspective that I would say is, the people you feel that you have lost along the way, are they really lost? Put aside the psychics, put aside the card readers, let's put all that BS aside for the moment and focus on what's real and what is the truth. The truth and reality is, the reason why you exist on this earth is because, for example, if there was loss through parents, for example, the very reason why you exist on this earth is because of your parents. Without your parents, you wouldn't exist to begin with. Without your parents, you wouldn't have a possible opportunity to be in the presence of maybe someone within reason. Look at the way you are as a person. This is the inner monologue in a situation. You're kind, you're caring, you've got a good sense of humour, you're very protective, you're strongly loyal, very understanding, very patient. You see the best in people even when they can't. You see the light in the darkness within people even when others aren't deserving of your oxygen, etc. Naturally, you're a very good person, you're a special individual. But partially, the only reason, or partially the reason why you are who you are is because of your parents, your upbringing, how they teached you, primary caregivers, primary attachment being formed as a child and onwards. When being in a world full of darkness and dangerous people and struggling times along the way, that can't be dismissed. But in terms of how you were shaped as a person from the beginning and who you are now and what you've retained deep down is a link to those people, such as parents, as in learning, behaviour, what's right, what's wrong, picking up on certain traits and characteristics, positives from the parents, which are now shared within you. So there can be certain traits or quirks that you carry which your parents did as well. So technically, whenever you feel like you've lost them or you feel that deep loss within, they never left you because they're a part of you. They're the reason why you're here. And the good positives within you, they're partially the reason why. Genetically as well, within reason, your eyes, your hair, colour, whatever, you may look similar to one of your parents or have certain features. You carry a part of them with you, externally and internally, biologically, metaphorically, and literally speaking. So the loss is real, the feeling of loss is real, that can never be taken away, but technically, the good person you are is a reflection of the good parents you had, and what you carry with you is your parents internally. Technically, they're never lost, they're still with you till this day. So that's a positive. And as well, it will show a lot more for a survivor who's gone through hell in the past and may have gone through reoccurring points of hell over and over again. And yet, look at how they are right now. Deep empathy, deep understanding, patient, caring. A survivor may feel like they've lost a part of themselves or that their heart has been crushed. And yet they've tried over and over again, seeing the best in people, trying to be a good individual, trying to be kind. There might be some trauma responses along the way, like people pleasing, but still the natural raw kindness and the positives within that said survivor, that light was never put out because that light was stronger than the darkness. The very thing that those abusive people did to you in the past to try and strip you of your identity, to try and take what's from you within. That technically, the abusive people in the past tried destroying what your parents made, as in you. Yet at the end of the day, you never left. They never left. But the parents that made you who you are and who you made yourself till this day still stands, whilst the darkness has either crumbled, pissed off elsewhere, or has, in a way, died itself. You're still here. You're still standing. Things might be shit. Things might be downhill. Things might be in a deep freeze, but you're still breathing. You're still existing. And those traits and positives are still held deep down within. If I was in a position where I knew of someone, I can see through that shield. At times, I can see through as to who people really are, both negatively but also positively. So I can't always speak for the other person, but as in saying, in a position of knowing someone, I might be able to see what's within them, which they may not be able to feel at first. As in, who they once were and who they were once around, as in parents, still there, never lost. Darkness, ex-partners tried taking it from that survivor. Survivor may feel like it's been taken from them. The power, the self-worth, the heart, the good within. It was never taken because I still see it. I still pick up on it. Never taken, bad people failed. You still exist. You might even be watching this video as well, which is key. What ultimately happens though to a survivor is all the darkness and the struggles, it compiles. That compiling leads to weight. And that weight can occupy the body, the mind, and the heart, filling up so much space that the person's previous form, their natural self, is repressed back. They may even deny themselves of their true self. So when they feel like they've lost themselves, a part of them have died. Not really the case. When they feel like their heart has been crushed, it's not forever. Things have been put on the back burner. Things have been suppressed. The good and the positives within them that makes them have been either put on pause or been repressed. They've never been taken. The parents, the loss within internally, the survivor, never taken, still there. It might not always be felt, but it's still there. Biologically, physically, metaphorically, and as a symbolism as well. They're never left, they're still about within reason. Okay? Positively speaking. That's like the thoughts, but the ideas too. Because on the sideline, people can say other stuff. Okay? It's kind of on the side this, but people can say, be positive, be this, be that. Oh, sorry. Oh, the world is cruel. Life's unfair. It is what it is. What a load of bollocks. If you can't actually provide anything of worth or value, what good does it do to a survivor? A survivor that may want closure, real closure, or want to finally be loved and acknowledged and accepted. Just these light-hearted passing lines and words are going to do absolute shit in the moment in such important times like that. That's why basic positivity and deep basic positivity is what's needed, or what I would try and do myself in the right situation and context, you know? Because pass on the book positivity. Oh, it'll get better. It is what it is. Life's cruel. Oh, so sorry to hear that. What good does it do? It doesn't change anything. The same way when a survivor needs closure with nightmares or waking up early in the morning. What does a psychic do? What do certain card readers do? Oh, it's someone from the past trying to communicate with you. Right, well, what does that do? It reconfirms that the survivor is trapped from the past and they can't move on. What next? Left on a cliffhanger. Cliffhanger positivity. Cliffhanger confirmation. It does no good, it just causes more damage and it adds more stress to a possible survivor. So if you're going to offer advice or provide perspective, you best do it appropriately. Now, I said, in my situation, if I knew of someone, I'd take it extremely serious. And it might seem a bit far-fetched, but what a survivor may not know, and I'm being honest. A survivor may not want to lose anyone else because it will shatter them, it will finish them off, almost like life or death. If I knew of a survivor, the way I treat the situation, and in my own mindset and with my own situations, I treat it as life and death as well. I take it extremely serious, but not in a dark, negative way, just in a understanding way. I treat it as life and death because I know how important it is as well to the survivor too in different situations. That's just for awareness in case if a person didn't know about that concept, that just in general, when it comes to a survivor, the dynamics there, what they may think or fear, the other half may have an alternative, similar way of thinking for other reasons, and so on. It's about filling that perspective because both sides, both opinions, both concepts are just as important as one another, especially when the dynamics are of a friendship or a relationship or something else and deeper. So, with that being said, hopefully this does help as in a different perspective. The effects it can have, the restrictions, the limitations, but then the understanding behind it and the responses, what can be done or what should be done by the hands of the other half within reason. So, if you know of someone that might help them, this video, feel free to share it. And for anyone else, it'd be appreciated if you hit the like button to let me know if it was of some use. If you found it somewhat interesting, that'd be appreciated. And yeah, we'll leave it there for now. Understandably, it was a deep, somewhat heavy video, but appreciate it if you did manage to watch or even just little parts of it. And you can always watch this video again whenever you like. You can replay it as many times as needed. This video and all the others are available up there where the playlist is. With that all being said, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye. Good night for now.